Hello and welcome to today's webinar with Technium and Secure W2. We're going to be discussing using Entra ID for Wi-Fi and VPN authentication. Our presenters today are Ben Russell from Technium and Micah Spady from Secure W2. With that, I'll let Ben introduce himself and hand it over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Melissa. Name's Ben Russell. I've been in the wireless networking and authentication game for roughly 2 decades now, deploying wireless networks back when they started in hospitals that were big and warehousing, to all sorts of different environments of all shapes and sizes, libraries, schools, you pretty much name it. I've worked in the environment. And over those years of deploying network and wireless, had to work with authentication quite a bit. So, worked with multiple different solutions for authentication and authorization for the wireless. I'm going to pass it over to Micah to give a quick preview on himself. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I only have half the Wi-Fi experience Ben does, so I'm glad he's handling a lot of the really technical slides here. Yeah, I'm Mike. I'm from Security 2. Work with the product team. Most of what I do is just make sure people understand our technology and understand how customers are using it. So really happy to be partnering with Technium to be on this webinar and really to answer any questions that you might have about how Security 2 is being used, how just the problem that we're talking about today, which is it's difficult to use Entra ID or Azure for networking purposes. We've seen over 1,000 deployments, and they're all a lot of similarities between these. And so hopefully you can answer any question you might have, and I can get back to you with what we're seeing. So I could start off with just an overview of Secure W2. We were founded in 2014 by Bert Kashup and Tom Rixum. We're widely known as a leader in digital certificates and passwordless network security, and we're just all about helping organizations everywhere eliminate credentials, better protect their network, and make sure that both admins and users are happy with the experience. As we know, as all IT professionals, and user experience might be the thing that we're graded on the most. So, we try and make sure that that's important. And over the years, we've helped thousands of companies and millions of devices adopt certificates and do what we're talking about today, which is use Entra ID for the networking. So I'll pass it off to Ben.
Thanks, Micah. So Technium, what we are a specialist in the wireless and network world. We have been working in this space for over 25 years. Some of our founders came out of the people who, for lack of a better term, gave birth to the internet, and that we've been focusing on providing enterprise-grade, high-quality networks for companies of all shapes and sizes for those 25 years. In that time, we adopted what we call the security first approach, which is every network that is built with security as the forefront, not an afterthought. That's a key element to our business. We partner with our customers to grow with them. One example customer started off with 30 employees and today is up over 8,000. And our design from the beginning of their growth scaled with them. That was part of our design to scale as they grew. And then we're committed to a culture. We have several different commitments, but for expertise, but also in training and learning. So we have a focus on helping encourage more education for network and security experts in the field. We'll talk about why we're here today to talk with the Secure W2 team. We are a network as a service solution vendor. That's what we do. We design and implement and manage fully automated networks for our customers. So that's everything from when your device connects to the Wi-Fi, my specialty, to the edge and security, as well as the cloud networking that many businesses have adopted at this point. We manage all of that in transport communication as a service for our customers, but we don't have the ability to manage authentication and security for those networks. So what we do is we find excellent partnerships. And a couple of years ago, we started that venture, and we've come to working really closely with SecureW2, which has led to this conversation, where we are working closely with them for all of our wireless and VPN authentication projects. So the goal of today's is to cover just a few things. This is a big topic, authentication, but specifically with Azure, Microsoft Azure, and managed devices, being able to reduce the time, because as I said, I've been doing this for a long time. I've done a lot of on-premise deployments for Radius and authentication, and those deployments are very time-consuming. Some of them will take, smaller ones will take couple of weeks. Larger ones will take months to roll out. It's not a small implementation or project. So the goal today is to talk about reducing that engineering time down to a much smaller amount of time to get this type of security in place. And then by doing so, increasing your security posture of your environment from the get-go.
Yeah, so I'll talk about why SecureW2. I think we had a little bit of a typo earlier. I wouldn't say that we're a policy management service. We offer a software as a service. We provide a platform which enables what we're here to talk about today, which is certificate-based authentication and 802.1x. So we're offering a complete platform that makes Radius authentication and PKI really easy with a class-leading policy engine. And for some organizations, device trust is the main reason they come to us. They want to enable policies that say, oh, my compliant Intune-managed devices are the only ones that can be on this VLAN or access this application, and we enable that. For other organizations, they're looking to move away from pre-shared key networks or move away from a less than ideal Active Directory networking setup. So we just offer a complete platform that allows you to move away from pre-shared keys, allows you to move away from your reliance on an on-premise Active Directory or an LDAP server that's needed for networking. And it's let's say we just got back from the ISTE K through 12 conference, and almost everyone that came to our booth said that they, in order to make the legacy Microsoft Radius server, which I think probably a lot of the people attending here have some sort of experience with or might be currently running, said that they had to have a hybrid AD setup to make NPS work, and it was just absolutely a nightmare. And we heard a lot of venting about the extra work that had to happen there. That you can't authenticate devices that are non-AD joined, so now you have to do this duplicate work of managing these Chromebooks or there's Macs that aren't in your AD, but they have to be authenticated, things like that. And that's a really common story that we hear that we're going to talk about today is SecureW2 allows you to tie your Azure, your Entra ID directly to network authentication. And that's a big reason why people choose SecureW2.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about those architectures that have transitioned. As Micah said, we call them legacy at this point, although some businesses may still be fully. I spoke to a company just last week that's fully AD on-prem. They haven't adopted any cloud, but most businesses I work with have some level of adoption to the cloud, and that there's some variation of where they're at with this transition to from the Microsoft on-premise, fully on-prem data center solutions to the fully cloud-based managed environment. But just here we talk about Active Directory, as most people should know, it's Azure AD. Systems Configuration Manager became Intune, which is kind of goes by a bunch of different names, but Microsoft Endpoint Manager, I think was the last one I heard about. But it's their MDM solution is what replaced the Systems Center. And then for Network Policy Server, which is the Windows role that runs Radius, there is no native cloud solution for that, which is why we're having these conversations. Secure W2 has that as one of the part of their SaaS offering, and one we've been working very successfully with. And then Active Directory certificate services is the other piece to that puzzle for through a certificate-based authentication. We have to issue out certificates. So ADCS was that service we've used for a long time. And that, again, Secure W2 has that as part of the package solution. So it makes it nice and neat for deployment. So this is just a general idea of what that implementation would look like. So I'll walk you through the steps we would go through to implement this when it was, when I reference on-prem, this could be on-premise in your data center. It could be in your cloud data center, AWS, Azure, but they're essentially mostly Windows services and roles that are run on a Windows server that's hosted by you or by your organization. And therein lies part of the issue is that those servers have to be maintained. So there's a lot of different moving parts. So just talk about a few of those items. So kind of working from the left to the right, we have to have some exposed services. We don't talk about DMZs much anymore. Again, it's kind of been around doing this for 20 years. DMZs were a big deal, and now we just talk more specifically about certain applications that have to be exposed. But the reality is we're still exposing something to the external access so that the devices can communicate to them. So in this case, the Radius servers and the certificate authorities have to be exposed to the outside so that the clients can get their certificates and validate those certificates. So they have to be part of that externally facing component. Then we have to have an entire private key infrastructure as part of that. That's what the ADCS, the certificate services, provides the PKI with a root, intermediate, and issuing certificate authorities. So that would be usually with a traditional Microsoft configuration, we deployed on Windows servers. And those would be internal, but again, there would have to be components of that were exposed or connected to the cloud if you're in a hybrid environment. And those would then talk to the back end Active Directory or LDAP servers. Sometimes they'll be the same server, but in a larger deployment, each of those services would be separated into separate servers. So we talk about the moving parts within this. There are several different servers, and whenever we get into high availability, we'd always have multiple network policy servers deployed for a primary and a backup radius at least. Sometimes we would separate those into different zones globally, so that we would have shorter latency to get to the Radius server. So a lot of factors and components in deploying your own, Radius and certificates with Microsoft. But again, something we've done for a very long time. It's been I think the first one was 15 years ago that deployed that. And then again, very on the right-hand side, a lot of that nowadays can sync with Active Directory to get those credentials to be accessible. But again, all these servers have to exist as part of the environment. So the alternative, what we have been, again, we did some evaluation the last couple of years and found that this was a really great architecture to move away from the legacy. We'll use the term legacy again, but from the on-prem, the fully Microsoft architecture was to utilize Secure W2's SaaS application to take care of honestly the more complicated and the most moving parts within that environment. So now with this architecture, you already have your Azure AD or your authentication platform in the cloud, and then the Secure W2 cloud essentially takes care of the rest. So the client will check in to request, the profile will get pushed down from the MDM. So if it's Intune, it gets pushed down from the MDM to push those profiles out to the client. That client will then request a certificate from Secure W2 securely, be issued a certificate. Generally, that's automatic. If you don't want it to be automatic, you can have a process involved where it gets approved and that certificate gets pushed down to the client. And then that client then uses another profile that's pushed out from the MDM to connect to the network, whether that's wireless or VPN. It's not really, it could be both. But then those configurations are essentially fully automated, pushed out to the clients as soon as they are enrolled and registered with your MDM through Azure. So providing that best level of security we can with certificates, without touching the endpoints. So a lot of great functionality, and the time it takes when we talk about the engineering time. We just saw on the last slide, there's a lot of moving parts in that architecture. Sometimes it can take days, weeks, or months to implement that solution. This we can set up in a matter of hours, maybe a couple of days, but we can have the first certificates rolled out to some of the clients very quickly in this architecture. Mike, I want to pass it over. Do you have anything you want to comment that I might have missed on this?
You did a great job on it, Ben, as you always do. I think one thing I wanted to add is that Ben's talking about the most common integration that we'll have, which is our Intune CA partner integration that we work with Microsoft directly to develop. So that is auto-enrolling managed devices for certificates that will be used for Wi-Fi or VPN. And this integration is built off of the standard SCEP protocol, and is an improvement over that in which that we're checking the identity of these Intune-managed devices before we're actually issuing the certificate. But I want to say that that's just one enrollment method that we support. And I think one of the big reasons why people like our platform is just the wide range of methods of enrollment that we support and the vendors that we integrate here. Here you're seeing, the MDM use case, right? But, we integrate with all the identity providers, and we have a self-enrollment piece of software that works for BYOD devices, very popular in higher education. For managed devices, we don't just do SCEP and, the Intune CA partner, but we support dynamic SCEP with Jamf. That's coming out later this month. We do WSTEP, JSON. We have Chrome extensions. We worked a lot last year with Apple directly to implement Acme that will check with the Apple servers to see, hey, is this Apple device genuine before we're giving them a certificate. And we can also look up MDMs, during the certificate enrollment, during radius authentication, to see, hey, is this Intune device compliant? How long has this device been non-compliant? And if it's been, 30 days, maybe let's consider moving them, to a different VLAN. We, do the same thing with Jamf. So I think that's just what I wanted to add a little bit on. And, if anyone has any questions, we're going to reserve some time at the end of the call for that on what we support and how we support that. But I just wanted to say that is our most common use case, and that's what we're here to talk about today. But that's one reason why people love our platform, is that the reality is that most organizations will have Intune and Jamf. They'll have Azure and they'll have Google. And that's the beauty of a platform like this, is that you can point all of these to Secure W2 and it'll all just work.
Thanks, Micah. Yeah, that's great. I love the contextual awareness component to verify that the device is compliant with the MDM. I heard that was a newer feature. I thought that was really great. Something I'd seen in other solutions in the past, and when you guys saw that on your feature ad list, I was very excited.
Guys, we had a handful of questions come in. Did you want to save those until the end, or try to tackle a few of those now?
Oh yeah, we do. Yeah, I think we could do a couple of them now. So the first one from Jacob: Security2 Cloud Solution utilizes HSMs. Yes, it does. So we're very much designed to be an enterprise solution. So and we store all of them in HSM modules, and also kind of related to that is that one of the reasons that people like our platform is that we have a variety of ways of ensuring that when the certificate is enrolled on the device, that the private key was generated on the hardware of the device. There are CA vendors, PKI vendors that will cut corners a little bit. and maybe send the private key over the air or enroll it in software. And that's not okay. Like, we are a security company first, and we can check, hey, is this certificate being enrolled in the secure enclave? Is it being enrolled in the TPM? And you have that information in the security v2 management portal. You can also create policies that say if that didn't happen, if that's not possible, like let's say that this is some IoT device, or some really old device, not to enroll a certificate for it at all. So I think that was something related that I wanted to address there. I think the Security 2's Cloud Radius supports certificate-based authentication while keeping Entra as the identity provider. Yes, we do. So the way that we're able to do that is that our Radius server will start with just doing the basic certificate checks. Is the certificate serial number on the CRL or not? Is the public private key match? The basic certificate check. And on top of that, you can layer a number of checks. And probably the one that you're referring to is that we can look up using OAuth, is this user still exists in Entra ID or not? And so we can check, it's completely customizable. You can check in any attribute of the certificate and just go verify that exists or not. So you can check the user exists or not. You can check Intune compliance. You can check whether they're in the same group, really anything that you'd want. And then that's the beauty of our policy engine is then you can say, should they have access or not? You can automatically revoke the certificate or suspend the certificate, unsuspended later. You can move them into a different VLAN. So the answer, Jerry, is yes, and you can do a lot of things like that. So let's see here. So we have another one. We have Intune for all corporate laptops and personal iOS devices. Entra will become a primary IDP later this year. If we go with Security to accomplish passwordless, could you please explain what auth would look like on personal Intune enrolled iOS devices? Yeah, I think so personal. So with this, I guess, Rashid, before I can answer this, would this be Intune? Would this be personal devices that you've enrolled in Intune, or is this is this like how do we get Intune enrolled on that? Like if you're using Intune Autopilot or not? I think if you could clarify that in there, I can answer the question. I guess I'll for the time being, I'll move on to Jacob's question, which is for compliance checking. You must use the Cloud Radius product. Right. So Cloud Radius and cloudradius.com is owned by us. There are other Cloud Radius server providers, but Cloud Radius Services is what is part of the Security 2 platform. And we can check that at the moment of authentication, but we can also check that in the moment of certificate enrollment as well. And our API checks in Intune every 10 minutes to see whatever you want. Whatever you want to configure, it will go look for it. And so it doesn't just depend on the Radius authentication or any of your network authentication timers. We can check compliance at any point for networking or just for certificates. And then I guess your last question before we resume with our slides is can you forward logs to a SIEM? Yes, you can. Any SIEM server is supported. Commonly we integrate with like Splunk and QRadar and other things like that. But yes, and one of the things that people like about that is that we contextualize it. So it's not like we're just forwarding logs, but we're including everything in there. Because we're a complete platform. The logs will say like, the this is a person that's on your network, and they were using this specific certificate, and they have this specific IP address, and whatever you like. It's all together and contextualized, and can be forwarded to any SIEM server. So.
Thank you, Micah. I think that was important to attack those now while they felt relevant to the slide.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I guess we'll keep moving.
Yeah. So some common themes for us. A big thing is getting rid of Active Directory certificate services. So, while I think there's a big misconception that ADCS is easy to set up and free. You log into YouTube and you just type in how do I set up ADCS, and there's like an hour tutorial, and it will get you to set up that. But I think what's helpful to know is that I'll just share this here in the comments section. But this is a great write-up that an organization called SpecterOps did, and it's literally over 140 pages long about what are all the default settings that come with ADCS, and how is that going to make your organization vulnerable. I think that as IT professionals, there's a little bit of pride of like just Google searching something and winging it. And PKI is not something that you can do that with. This is something that we're making some big decisions off of whether a certificate's there or not. And it's really, really easy to set it up incorrectly, and to set it up in a way that an enterprise organization can really trust these certificates is really expensive. So it was actually DigiCert that did the initial research and found that the true cost of setting up ADCS is often over 3 times the cost of a service like SecureW2. We frequently have people that come to us, really smart people that are managing PKI for decades, and they say, the more I know about PKI, the less I want to manage it. It's really complicated, and it's just one of those things that it's just a lot more time effective to let the experts handle it. So that's a big common theme, is getting rid of ADCS. Whether it was poorly implemented or they just don't want to keep maintaining it, that's a big theme. Another one is just migrating from AD to Cloud Azure AD. Ben touched on this earlier, but a lot of folks that are not using a service like us have to rely on some on-premise services to make their networking based on their Azure or Entra ID identities. And we eliminate that. And it's amazing how fast, like an experienced person like Ben can set up a network to just have Azure talk directly to SecureW2. These things take, an hour, sometimes even less, where you're just setting up an API, works directly with SecureW2, and now you can deprecate a lot of these servers. I did a quick Google search before we did this today, which was, there was 15 security updates that were required for Windows Server 2022 last year, and there were 17 for Windows Server 2016. These are, I think everyone here has experienced. It's not trivial to do that, to update that. There's a lot of dependencies on that. You have to do it during off hours. It's not fun. And so just getting rid of on-premise servers is one of the main drivers why someone will come to SecureW2. Compliance or insurance requirements. There's a lot of organizations that they get a security audit and they're like, we need to get rid of pre-shared keys. We make it super easy to do that. You get lower cyber insurance if you implement phishing resistant authentication. If you use SecurityW2 certificates to do, you know, your VPN authentication, you can use certificates now to sign into Azure or sign into Okta for application access. Certificates are phishing resistant authentication and will lower your cyber insurance. And then the next one is preparing for CMMC 2.0. That's been a big thing that people have been coming to us for is that there's a lot of requirements that NIST is saying that organizations that do research or work with federal government entities need to hit these requirements, and one of them specifically calls out doing EPTLS 802.1x with radius authentication, and that's what we allow you to do. We're a complete platform that allows you to do that. So device trust, we talked about that a little bit earlier, but certificates allow you to confidently say, I know what device is behind this IP address on my network. I know that in this VLAN, only these devices are allowed in there. Certificates are really the only way that you can do something like that. And now that systems like Azure CBA and Okta support using certificates, you can now do things that say, only my compliant managed devices can use this application. So then you can let your users access their email on their personal phone, but they're not going to be able to access the finance software or any DevOps sort of systems like that. And I would say the last one is just simplifying the end user experience. No passwords means no password resets, right? That's I think everyone here has pushed the password reset, policy, and known that a lot of people push that to the very last minute or just don't do it at all. If you're using those passwords for Wi-Fi, they're just going to be disconnected and they're going to be mad at you, whether or not it was completely their fault or not. And that's just the reality that IT professionals live in, unfortunately. But when you do certificate-based authentication, that doesn't happen anymore. And we our most commonly issued client certificate, it has a 4-year lifetime. And so all your users will automatically have Wi-Fi working. They'll automatically be put in the right segment. They'll automatically be removed from the network if we detect something is not right. And it just works. It just happens all on the background, and it's just a lot easier for end users. I think that's that's there. I know. I think before this one, I see that Rashid had followed up on the question I asked, which is that it's Intune MAM with Apple Business Manager, not a full MDM. Yeah. So I would. So we don't work with that. Yeah. So, but that being said, like Ben can talk about, we have a product called MultiOS, which is basically a suite of software applications that allow anyone to self-enroll themselves for a certificate and get on the network. And it doesn't rely on an MDM. So Rashid, if that's for those devices, there still is a solution for that. So.
Yeah, and I can, when we implement radius and authentication, I like to talk about workflows. And so in this case, for those personal devices, they would be a workflow that would have a self-enrollment link that you would use, so that person gets a new phone. You just like when Apple Business Manager is going to pull it in and push it through the MAM is the application management layer, but it doesn't have full device control. But they can just have a link that they can click on that will then verify their Entra ID then there's within that policy, they can have a limited number of devices. So they can be limited to one, they can be limited to a handful. They can also self-unenroll in a legacy phone if they lost or had a previous phone disabled, then it will remove those certs. So workflows are there for those types of devices that aren't fully managed as well. So hopefully that answers that question. All right, so on this slide here, we're just talking about, since we've started working with Secure W2 in the past couple of years, we've had some really successful rollouts for helping our customers with enhancing their security. First one is a smaller organization that came to us, and they had been a fully remote organization, and they wanted to build their new office. Came to us for their networking, and we partnered with Secure W2 for their authentication. And that when basically the end result was that we had already had everything configured. They got their office, their network was standing up. They walked into the office the first day, everyone was connected. There was no need for an on-site IT person because the company didn't have one. So they had everything was connected. They were a full wireless shop. They were able to connect. Their VPN connection was all operational, but it's just a real nice way of having everything pre-configured, using all cloud-based authentication and resources, and being able to have the infrastructure in the building ready to walk into and be fully connected. Another one, we worked with a customer, a long-standing customer of ours. They have a mission-critical wireless, which has become, I'm in the wireless business, so I have a lot of conversations about wireless, but a lot more businesses have said that their wireless is mission-critical. It's part of their operation. It used to be that wireless was, as long as it works in the conference rooms, we're fine, but now it needs to be ubiquitous, working all the time, and that even short-term outages need to be scheduled and planned with any other planned outage and downtime. So it's a pretty much bigger deal than it used to be in that regard. This customer has what we call mission critical wireless, and the regulatory compliance that they have to for their business does an annual audit, and one of the things that was flagged was their they were still using pre-shared keys for wireless. So partnering with Secure W2, we had a migration plan for them, which is this is another thing that I talk to a lot of people about. It can be very seamless and almost non-impactful to the business to roll something like this out, even if you don't have Radius today. We stand up an additional wireless with Secure W2 behind it, and then we push out the profiles to those clients to get their certificate and then get their wireless, and then they automatically join the wireless network, the new wireless network, so that there's no downtime for those devices and those users, and that all happens essentially behind the scenes on the device, very seamless. And then from the infrastructure side, we can see what's still remaining on the pre-shared key network, and that essentially gives us a punch list of devices to either hunt down or remove, or turn it before we turn off that Wi-Fi. So it's a very seamless operation, but we did that with that customer, on their schedule, but it only took us a couple of months to go away from pre-shared keys to fully secured. And the actual turn up time was only a few hours, but then we migrated slowly so that there was no business impact. All right, to wrap up. So ideally, the concept we wanted to come across today was just easier authentication for end users. So instead of utilizing the legacy configuration, which has a lot of moving parts with on-premise Active Directory and those pieces from when that Radius authentication happens at the infrastructure side, whether it be the VPN or the wireless, it has to hit a server, and having those hosted adds a certain amount of variables, and the end user experience can be a lot worse for that reason. Again, the engineering time, again, it's about fewer moving parts, fewer components to that environment, and a fully established solution from Secure W2 provides both Radius and certificate-based authentic components for the full PKI, and that really makes the implementation of these much faster, smoother, and simpler. So we've been working with that and it's been very successful. And then just general security. We've again, past 15 years, certificate-based authentication was always the goal, for every organization that we worked with from a security standpoint, but not every company could get there. It was they may not have been able to maintain their own certificate authority, or they may have just preferred to use protected EAP, which was user and password-based authentication, which worked for a long time, but nowadays it's not supported for any of these cloud-based authentications. So this is a better way to get to that EAP-TLS for certificate-based authentication in that regard. So hopefully we were able to share some of that with you today.
Yeah, it's a great wrap up, Ben. Yeah, I think now we set aside a little bit of time for any additional questions that we might have here. I see, Jerry, you had a question that we haven't answered yet. So with Cloud Radius, users do not have to log in to the corporate Wi-Fi. Yes, that's correct. So SecurityW2's platform, like what we're talking about here, we're all about certificate-based authentication. So we provide an automated way to get certificates on devices and continuously check in systems like Entra ID or Intune to make sure that that person should have a certificate. And then that certificate is used for the Wi-Fi. So they're not going to have to go and enter their Azure or AD credentials anymore into their Wi-Fi settings. The certificate will be there, and it will be automatically configured by Intune or by our BYOD onboarding software. So, for BYOD devices, they will have to do a one-time enrollment. For most devices in like a corporate setting, they will just be automatically enrolled from the MDM. They don't have to enter in, their Azure or their AD credentials to get under the corporate Wi-Fi. So hopefully that answers your question, Jerry.
All right. Ben and Micah, thank you so much. I think this packed in a lot of information, and thanks to those who shared their questions. If anyone else has a question, please feel free to post it in the comments, or you can reach out to Ben or Micah directly on LinkedIn. And I think that's it. Anything you guys want to add before we wrap it up? No?
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.